I never thought a simple favor like giving someone directions would lead to my apartment doorbell ringing 2 hours later. Honestly, I was just trying to be helpful, but apparently that's how these things start, right? So picture this, it's a Thursday night, and I'm sitting at this little coffee shop I like on the corner of my street. It's one of those places with flaky croissants and decent espresso. Nothing fancy but cozy enough if you want to escape your apartment for a bit. I was scrolling through my phone, half focused, when this guy walks in looking totally lost. Like, full on, I have no idea where I am or where the hell I'm supposed to be, kinda lost. He looked the type you'd imagine if someone dropped a modern art student into a random city block. His clothes were cool but mismatched, kind of like he was trying to look effortlessly stylish, but ended up just looking confused. And he had this ridiculous backpack that probably weighed as much as a small child. He came up to me and asked, pretty nervously, if I knew how to get to some underground music venue. I couldn't help but chuckle, because I'd been to that exact place a bunch of times. It's where all the local indie bands play, and honestly, it's one of my favorite spots to unwind after a long week. So I gave him the directions, but I also started adding some tips, like which streets to avoid if he didn't want to get stuck behind some long construction, or where to grab the best late-night tacos nearby. We started talking, and it turned out he was new to the city, just moved here for some art internship. I could tell he was trying to play it cool, but you could sense the nerves underneath. Honestly, I found it kind of endearing. After maybe 10 minutes of chatting, he thanked me and said he better get going before the show started. I gave him a nod and watched him disappear into the evening crowd. Honestly, that should have been it. The kind of casual, one-off interaction where you never see the person again. But no. That's when things started to get weird. In a good way. About 2 hours later, my doorbell rings. And guess who's standing there? The lost guy from the coffee shop. He's holding a vinyl record under one arm and wearing this half grin like he just pulled off something mildly embarrassing but totally worth it. I'm standing there, still in my hoodie and pajama pants, wondering if I'm dreaming or if this is some kind of joke. He says, "Hey, I know this is random, but I just figured I'd say thanks for the directions, and maybe see if you want to help me figure out this record." It's my first one from the city, and just like that, my night took a turn I definitely didn't expect when I first saw him at the coffee shop. I stood there for a second, blinking like I'd just woken up from a nap, and he caught me completely off guard. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be flattered, annoyed, or just genuinely curious about what was going on. I mean, who just shows up at a stranger's apartment with a vinyl record as a thank you? It's not exactly common. But there was something about his awkward confidence that didn't feel weird or creepy, just earnest. Sure, I said finally, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on in." He shuffled past me, and I couldn't help but notice how the dim hallway lights caught the freckles on his nose. I don't usually pay attention to stuff like that, but for some reason, it stuck with me. Inside, my apartment was a mess. Books piled on the coffee table, empty mugs on the kitchen counter, but he didn't seem to mind. He dropped his backpack by the door and plopped down on the couch like we were old friends instead of just acquaintances who met 10 minutes earlier. So, he said, holding up the record like it was some rare treasure, "I found this at a tiny record store around the corner. It's supposed to be some underground band that's big in the city's music scene. Thought maybe you'd know if it's any good." I took the record from him and examined it. The cover had this grainy black and white photo of a group of guys standing in an alleyway, looking like they'd just stepped out of a late 80s music video. I'd never heard of them, but something about the packaging felt familiar, like the kind of band that's always playing at that underground venue he was trying to get to earlier. "Can't say I've heard of them," I admitted. "But that place you were looking for? They probably have a ton of bands like this." He smiled, this time less nervous, more relaxed. "Yeah, I'm trying to dive into the scene here. I moved from Philly, and man, it's a whole different vibe." We ended up talking for a while, swapping stories about music, art, and how moving to a new city feels like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. I told him about my job at the bookstore down the street and how I wasn't exactly a music expert but had a playlist for almost every mood. He told me about his internship at a small art gallery, how he was trying to find his place in the city's chaotic art world. At some point, one of his jokes made me laugh so hard I almost spilled my coffee, and I realized I hadn't done that in a long time. There was this easy rhythm to our conversation, like we'd known each other way longer than a coffee shop encounter and an impromptu vinyl exchange. "Hey," he said suddenly, almost shyly, "are you gonna play that record or what?" I grinned. "Yeah, let's see what the fuss is about." I rummaged through my old stereo system, dusted off the turntable, and gently placed the needle on the spinning vinyl. The first chords filled the room, gritty, raw, with this kind of energy that made you want to move even if you were sitting still. He leaned back on the couch, eyes closed, nodding along like he was already picturing himself at the venue, surrounded by people who got it. I watched him for a moment, this mix of hope and something softer in his expression. It hit me that maybe, just maybe, this random meeting was the start of something neither of us expected. We talked more about music, about bands we liked, and I showed him a couple of my favorite records. Time slipped by faster than either of us noticed, and before I knew it, it was past midnight. At some point, he looked over at me and said, "Thanks for letting me crash your place like this." "I know it's kind of weird," I shrugged, feeling this goofy grin spreading across my face. "Not weird at all. It's nice. Honestly, I wasn't expecting company tonight." He laughed softly. "Yeah? Well, I guess that's what you get when you give someone directions." I opened my mouth to say something, but then the doorbell rang again. We both looked at each other, and I swear for a second we both thought I was losing it. Who the hell else would come knocking this late? I went to the door and peeked through the peephole. It was one of my neighbors, a friendly but nosy guy who always seemed to know what was going on in the building. I opened the door and he said, "Hey man, sorry to bother you, but I thought I heard music. That's not a problem, right? Just wanted to check." I waved him off. "No problem at all. Come on in if you want." He shook his head, smiling. "Nah, I'll leave you two to it. Just wanted to make sure everything's cool." I closed the door and turned back to find my new visitor watching me with a slight smirk. "Well, that's your cue to keep the volume down," he teased. I laughed and sat back down beside him. For some reason, the whole night felt like it was unfolding exactly as it should. Messy apartment and all. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what happened next. The music kept spinning, filling the small apartment with this gritty, authentic sound that made the walls feel a little less like concrete and more like home. I glanced over at him, and he was already tapping his foot, eyes closed, swaying just a little. The way he got lost in the music made me want to lean in closer, as if the rhythm was pulling us into the same space, quiet but somehow electric. After that first song wrapped up, he turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Okay, I admit it, that was better than I expected," I grinned, nudging him with my shoulder. "See? Told you, not all old records are crusty." He laughed, this easy, genuine laugh that honestly made me feel like I'd just stumbled onto something rare. We fell into a comfortable silence for a bit, just letting the music run through the speakers and fill the gaps between us. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but there was this tension in the air, not the kind that makes your chest ache, but the kind that makes you want to lean in and see if the other person feels it too. "So," he said after a while, "you live around here alone?" I shrugged. "Yeah. It's just me and my books. Not the most exciting life, but it's mine." He nodded, like he understood more than what I said. "I get that. I'm trying to make this city feel like home too. It's tough when everything's new and a little intimidating." I looked over at him and caught a flicker of something. Vulnerability, maybe? And it made me want to reach out in a way I rarely do. "You're not as alone as you think, you know." He gave me a lopsided smile, like I'd just said something both ridiculous and kind. Maybe not. The next song came on, slower this time, with a voice that was rough but full of feeling. He sat a little closer, and I could smell this mix of coffee and something faintly like cedar wood coming off him. I didn't say anything because I was pretty sure if I opened my mouth, I'd sound like an idiot. But the way he looked at me, like maybe he wanted something to happen but wasn't sure how to ask for it, made my heart stutter. The sound of rain started tapping on the window behind us. I'd forgotten it was supposed to rain tonight, but somehow the soft patter outside made the whole room feel more intimate, like we were in our own little world. "Do you want to get out of the rain sometime?" he asked suddenly, voice low. I almost choked on my own breath. "Like, go out?" Together? He shrugged, this easy, tooly grin returning. Yeah, I mean, if you want. No pressure. For a second, I couldn't process how quickly everything had shifted, from a random coffee shop encounter to him standing in my living room holding a record to now this. But I found myself smiling, honestly surprised at how good it felt to just say yes. Yeah, I'd like that. He smiled so wide it made me want to pinch his cheeks. Cool. I'm glad I showed up. There was this beat where neither of us said anything, just letting the idea hang between us. Then, as if the moment got too heavy, he laughed and stood up. I should probably head out before your neighbor starts thinking we're hosting some kind of party. I grabbed my jacket off the back of a chair and held the door open for him. Outside, the rain had picked up, but neither of us seemed to mind the sudden downpour. We stood for a second in the hallway, close enough that I could see the little smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Same time tomorrow? He asked, like it wasn't a big deal, but I could hear the hope in his voice. I nodded. Yeah, it's a date. As he walked down the stairs, I felt this warm buzz in my chest that had nothing to do with the music or the rain. It was something new, something I hadn't expected on a random Thursday night when I was just trying to enjoy a quiet coffee. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, running a hand through my hair. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from him. Thanks for the directions, and for letting me crash your place. Can't wait for tomorrow. I smiled so hard I thought my face might hurt. As I slid my phone back into my pocket, the rain outside softened, and I realized maybe this city wasn't so intimidating after all. Not if you had someone to share the soundtrack with. The next day, I found myself glancing at my phone way more often than I should have, waiting for his reply or some kind of text to confirm our little plan. It was a strange feeling, like being a teenager again, nervous and excited all at once. When he finally texted me, meet at the taco place near the venue, 7-ish, I couldn't help but grin. I got there a little early, trying to act casual even though my stomach was doing backflips. The taco spot was one of those hole-in-the-wall joints with neon signs and a smell that could make anyone hungry. I ordered a couple of tacos, extra spicy because, well, why not? And waited by the window, watching the street buzz with people. Then I saw him. The same, slightly mismatched style, but with this easy confidence that hadn't been there the first night. He waved, and I waved back like a total dork before heading over. Hey, he said, smiling as he took a bite of his taco. You look good. I mean, not that I didn't think so yesterday, but, you know. I laughed. Thanks. You too. We fell into conversation like that night all over again, but this time it felt different, more deliberate, less accidental. We talked about the city, our favorite spots, and what we missed from home. I told him about the bookstore's upcoming poetry night, and he got this excited look like it was something he'd definitely want to check out. After dinner, we decided to walk toward the venue, the streets alive with the noise and lights of the city at night. He talked about his art, showing me sketches on his phone, and I shared stories from my job, including some of the weird customers I'd had. Somewhere between the jokes and the quiet moments, I realized I was actually enjoying myself more than I had in a long time. At one point, we stopped at a small park bench near the venue. The rain from the night before had left the sidewalk shining under the streetlights. He looked over at me, eyes bright. I've been meaning to ask, he said. Do you come to shows here a lot? Sometimes, I admitted. Mostly when I need a break from the usual. You? Not yet, he said, but I'm thinking tonight would be a good night to start. I could see the excitement mixed with nervousness, and it was kind of adorable. Want to go in together? He nodded, and we stepped into the venue, the sound of guitars and drums washing over us. The crowd was small but lively, with people swaying and talking over the music. We found a spot near the back, and I could feel his shoulder brush mine. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a thrill through me. During the set break, he leaned in and whispered, "Thanks for tonight. For everything. I don't usually do this kind of thing." I shrugged, trying to play it cool but feeling my heart race. Neither do I, but maybe we should do it more often. He smiled, eyes gleaming. I'd like that. As the next band started, we stayed close, the music blurring the edges of everything else. There was this strange comfort in just being near him, sharing the moment without needing to say more. After the show, he walked me back to my place, the city quieting down around us. At my door, we hesitated, caught in the space between goodbye and something more. "Want to come in for a bit?" I asked, barely daring to hope. He nodded, and we stepped inside. The apartment felt warmer somehow, less messy in the soft glow of the lamplight. I put on some quieter music, and we sat close on the couch, the night stretching out in front of us. Without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. His fingers curled around mine, and I felt this surge of something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or the start of something real. He looked at me then, the way you look at someone when everything else falls away. "I'm really glad I gave you a hard time for directions." I laughed softly. "Yeah, me too." And in that small, messy apartment with the city humming outside, I realized that sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. After that night, things started to feel different, but not in some dramatic movie-style way. It was subtle, like when you shift the thermostat just a little and suddenly the whole room feels warmer. We kept texting, trading playlists, sharing weird little stories from our days. And every time I saw him, it was like this quiet electricity buzzed between us, making the ordinary feel charged. One afternoon, I was at the bookstore, restocking shelves and trying to concentrate, when my phone buzzed. It was him, sending a picture of a canvas splattered with color and chaos. "Finally finished this one. Want to see it?" I replied right away, "Send it over." Moments later, his message popped up. The painting was wild and vibrant. A mess of blues and reds and yellows that somehow all worked together. I saved it and then texted back, "This is amazing. You're really talented." The reply came fast. "Thanks. It means a lot. Want to see it in person?" "I'm showing some pieces at the gallery this weekend." I hesitated for a second. Galleries weren't really my scene, but something told me to say yes. I'd love to. Saturday came, and I found myself standing outside this small brick-front gallery that looked like it had been there forever. Inside, the walls were covered with all sorts of art, but my eyes kept coming back to his paintings. The chaos in the colors felt like a reflection of him. Bold, unfiltered, a little rough around the edges, but impossible to ignore. He appeared beside me, looking a little nervous but glowing with pride. "So, what do you think?" I studied the canvas again. It's like you captured a storm and turned it into color. He smiled, and then out of nowhere, he reached for my hand. It felt natural, like the pieces of the day were finally fitting together. "I'm glad you came," he said softly. I squeezed his hand. "Me too." As we wandered through the gallery, talking about everything and nothing, I realized that I was starting to want more than just these moments. I wanted to know the way his mind worked, the stories behind his messy smile, the quiet things he didn't say out loud. Later that night, back in my apartment, the world felt smaller and somehow safer. We sat on the couch, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, the city lights flickering through the window. The conversation slowed, and there was this weight hanging between us, the kind you feel before you cross some invisible line. He looked over, eyes searching. "Can I be honest?" "Always." "I'm scared sometimes, of putting myself out there, of being rejected. But with you, it feels different." I nodded, heart pounding. "I get that." "I'm scared too, but maybe being scared means you care." He smiled, this small, vulnerable thing that made me want to hold him close. "So, where do we go from here?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I took a breath, feeling the pulse of the moment. "We figure it out, together." He leaned in, and when our lips met, it was soft, tentative at first, like two people testing the water. But then it deepened, becoming something real and undeniable. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, I realized that giving someone directions was the easiest part. The hardest was letting someone find their way into your life. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best kind of adventure. After that night, things moved in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying all at once. I mean, we'd kissed, sure, but what came next wasn't some grand declaration or a Hollywood montage. It was just us, trying to figure out how to be around each other without overthinking every little thing. The following week, we fell into this easy rhythm. We'd text throughout the day, sometimes about the mundane stuff like what we ate or how crazy the subway was, other times about deeper things, like what scared us or what we wanted out of life. And when we met up, it was like stepping into a small bubble where the noise of the city faded, and it was just us. One afternoon, he invited me to this little cafe he'd discovered, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and walls covered in old concert posters. We settled into a corner, sipping overpriced lattes and sharing a slice of some bizarre vegan cake that tasted way better than it had any right to. So, he started, fiddling with his cup. "How's the bookstore? Any weird customers lately?" I laughed. Does a guy who tries to return a book because it gave him nightmares count? He grinned. Only if he's standing behind a line of dust-covered classics. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, that's basically my life. For a while, we just sat there, comfortable in the silence, until he looked up and said, "You know, I've been thinking about us." My heart did that stupid jump thing. Yeah. He shrugged, cheeks coloring a little. I guess I'm trying to find the right words. I like this. What we have. It's new, but it feels good. Right. I nodded because I felt the same, even if it was scary to admit it out loud. I like it too. It's not perfect, but maybe that's what makes it real. He reached across the table and took my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, and suddenly the world felt less intimidating. A few days later, I woke up to a text from him. "Got tickets to a show this Friday. Thought we could check it out together?" I smiled so hard I almost didn't believe it. Would love that. The night of the show, we met outside the venue. The city buzzed around us. The scent of street food, the chatter of people, the distant hum of traffic. But when he smiled at me, none of it mattered. Inside, the music was loud and raw. We stood close, shoulders brushing, sharing the energy that pulsed through the crowd. During a quiet moment between songs, he leaned in and whispered, "Thanks for sticking around." I looked at him, surprised. "Hey, it's easy when you're worth it." He smiled, eyes shining. "You're pretty amazing, you know." That night, walking back through the empty streets, the air thick with the promise of rain, I realized how much I'd come to care about this guy, who once just needed directions. At my door, we paused. The world felt like it was holding its breath. "Can I tell you something kind of crazy?" he asked. "Try me. I'm really scared of messing this up, of losing what we have." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "Me too, but maybe that means it's worth fighting for." He nodded slowly, this little smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I want to fight." I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." And in that moment, standing in the quiet glow of my hallway light, I knew that sometimes the best journeys start with the smallest steps, even if those steps lead you right to someone's front door. We crossed that threshold. Me holding the door open, him stepping inside like he belonged there already, and something shifted. It felt like the kind of moment you don't know is important until it's already happened. The night outside was cold, but inside my apartment, the air suddenly seemed warmer, charged. We settled on the couch, the dim light casting shadows that made everything feel intimate without us having to say anything. I could tell he was nervous, fiddling with the edge of his sleeve, and honestly, I was right there with him. So he started, voice low. "I guess this is official now?" "Whatever. This is." I laughed softly. "Yeah, I guess it is. Feels kind of surreal." He looked at me with that nervous grin, the one that made his eyes sparkle. "I'm glad we're in it together, though." "Me too," I said, reaching out to brush his hair back from his forehead. The small gesture felt electric, and for a moment, the world outside didn't exist. We talked late into the night about fears, dreams, and the weird little things that make us who we are. I learned that he had a habit of collecting old concert tickets, and that he'd always wanted to learn how to play guitar but never really tried. I told him about the time I got locked in the bookstore overnight and how I'd sung to keep myself company. When the conversation finally lulled, he leaned in closer, his breath warm on my cheek. "Can I kiss you again?" I didn't even hesitate. Yeah. Our lips met, soft and searching at first, then with more certainty. It was the kind of kiss that told stories of hesitation, hope, and maybe a little bit of fear, but mostly of wanting to be close. Afterward, we just stayed close, wrapped up in each other, and the quiet hum of the city beyond my windows. The next few weeks were a blend of new routines and stolen moments. We went to shows, explored the city's hidden corners, and spent lazy Sundays tangled up in blankets and conversation. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and moments of doubt, but it was ours. One evening, as we sat on my fire escape, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, he turned to me and said, "I'm really happy you were the one who gave me those directions." I smiled, heart swelling. Me too. Funny how a simple favor can change everything. He leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt this deep, steady warmth spread through me, a feeling I wanted to hold on to forever. And maybe that's what love is, a series of small, unexpected moments that, when you look back, make all the difference. Months passed, and what started as a chance meeting stretched into something steady and real. We weren't perfect. There were still moments when we stumbled, unsure about where we fit or how to balance work and life and what we were building together. But those moments never felt like deal breakers. They were just part of the process, the slow weaving of two lives into one. One Sunday morning, sunlight spilled into my apartment in those quiet golden patches that make you want to stay in bed just a little longer. He was curled up next to me, his head resting on my chest, fingers tracing lazy patterns across my skin. I could feel the steady beat of his breath, and in that warmth, I found something I hadn't realized I'd been looking for, a place to belong. I turned to look at him, and he smiled up at me, eyes still heavy with sleep, but bright with something else. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought a simple favor would lead to this." "Neither did I admitted, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Funny how life works like that. We stayed like that for a while, the world outside moving in its usual chaos, but inside, time slowed down. It wasn't about grand gestures or big declarations. It was about the quiet moments we shared, the everyday kindnesses that built something lasting. Later that day, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, the city around us humming with life. We stopped at a little park, and he pulled me close, resting his head on my shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me directions that day, for letting me into your world." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle warmly in my chest. "Thank you for showing up, for being here." In that moment, I realized that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from unexpected places. And maybe love isn't about fireworks or perfect timing. It's about the courage to open your door, both literally and figuratively, and welcome someone in. Walking back to my apartment hand in hand, I felt grateful for that rainy night, for the record he brought, and for the way a simple act of kindness had unfolded into something far more beautiful than I could have imagined. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing.